Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Books Live. I'm Christy from Vintage Books, and tonight we are super excited to have Claire Forrest, whose debut YA novel came out a few weeks ago, and I read it and really, really loved it and reached out to Claire to see if she'd be willing to do an interview with us, and she said yes, so we're very happy, and she's here with us tonight. Claire, I usually ask a similar question to start off the interview for with most of the people that I talk to, and that is just if you could tell us the story of how this book came to be.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and talk about the book. And to me, I feel like Where You See Yourself was sort of a long time coming because I wrote stories for years, but I wrote about non-disabled girls. And because I thought that those were the type of characters that got to be in books and be main characters and have their stories told. So the story behind specifically Where You See Yourself is that I was accepted to an MFA program, and I knew that I wanted to start a new novel in that program. And I knew that if I was going to ever write about disability, which I am a wheelchair user who has cerebral palsy, I knew that, if I was ever going to do this, now felt like the time. And initially, I kept trying to say to myself, like, oh, I'll write some type of like an ensemble story about the senior year of high school, and there'll be all these different characters deciding when to go to college, and maybe one of the characters can be in a wheelchair, but she can't be the main character. And just I could never really get behind an idea. I could never get fully excited about it. And then one day I was coming home from work actually, and I just said to myself, like, it's got to be this character's story. It's got to be the character in a wheelchair, and it's got to be solely her story, and this is what you have to do. And I sort of knew all along that was what I had to do. I just had to come to it. And then I had sort of been saving the name Wilder in the back of my head for a book, and I then went home and thought about it. I'd heard the name Effie a couple times, and I Googled it, and the first result at the time was a message board community for expectant parents, and somebody was like, we love the name Effie, we hate the name Euphemia. And I just had this thought about these two characters who had this inside joke about how to pronounce her name, and I didn't have all the details of the story yet, but I knew I had a book in there somewhere because that just felt like the inside jokes that me and my friends had in high school.
Yeah, I'm actually, not that, as a reader, you're not the one who gets to decide the story. You just get to enjoy it. But I'm really glad that you made Effie just the only main character. I just thought that, well, for one thing, unfortunately, it's needed. I wish it weren't. I wish that there were all kinds of books out there with, I'm starting to see more and more like ADHD and autism and other mental health and other brain-based things being represented in stories. But I feel like the physical disabilities is just lagging behind. I feel like that's an area that just doesn't have the main character representation like it needs to. And so I was really thrilled to read Effie and Effie's story. And I do love the inside running joke that goes through the whole book about her name, and Wilder's can pronounce her name and all these other people can't. I thought that was very sweet and fun. What you're closest to the characters because they came from your heart and your head, and what do you love about Effie and her character?
That's a great question. I love that she has a very dry sense of humor. I think that's the thing that she and I share. And I think her vulnerability and her softer moments came to me later in the story, and I had to develop that a little bit more. And I realized that maybe she was in some earlier drafts that she was using her humor as a way to kind of have a shell around her to not admit at times how scared she was or how angry she was about certain situations. And so I love that she's she became able to show that side of her over time. And
Yeah.
I've heard from a couple of disabled readers say it's really refreshing to have a character who is disabled who sometimes says, this kind of sucks, and
Yeah.
it's never in like an oh poor me way or feel bad for me. It just is acknowledging that there is inequity in our world, and that is hard and unfair.
Yeah.
And so I love that she's able to express that and to shed light onto that.
Yeah. Well, I maybe jump in to that piece of it, the disability representation, and like you and Effie share the experience of both being wheelchair users in a world that is not built for it. There'll be spots that are, and then 5 feet down the sidewalk or in a building or whatever, then suddenly it's not. And I was curious as a writer how you kept, Effie's character, like Effie's character, I'm sure was in a way to channel some of the experiences that you have in a way that people could understand and relate to. But how did you keep the two separate in your mind too? Because I don't, some of it is maybe autobiographical in the sense that you used your own experiences to inform the character, but it's not an autobiography. And so how did you kind of keep those characters, you and the character, separate?
Yeah, it's really important to me that people know that this is a work of fiction. That I think I've had sometimes people say that I am Effie, or that I secretly wrote a book to write about my own experiences, and that's
Yeah.
I think that every author, when they write fiction, they take some things from their real life and they
Yeah.
kind of watch it, make it into something else. I I guess my answer is that partially that I set the book in my hometown, and so I know the challenges of navigating this place in a chair. And some of it, I think, with chair users is really universal. I think if you put like 10 wheelchair users in a room, we would all talk about the same type of
Yeah. Yeah.
access issues. Unfortunately, they're everywhere. I've had some people say, like, which colleges were you actually talking about when you talked about certain colleges in the book? Some of them are fictional, and I say it's not a college, it's all of the colleges.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Even if they're doing better than some in terms of accessibility, they all have ways to improve. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
certainly true of all of our communities that we live in terms of accessibility.
Yeah. No, my two are in college right now, and that's actually an issue that the students have been pushing on, because there are some areas of disability that the college does an amazing job supporting, but still for people with access related disabilities, like it's still horrible. So it's kind of like, okay, but you need to fix this. And
No,
it's frustrating this far on. I read when I was working on like questions for today, I read the essay you wrote on the ADA's anniversary, and it is disheartening that this far into it we are still so much is not there yet.
yeah.
But one of the things I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question without setting up like a spoiler, because I really want people to go out and read it. Um, but one of the things that really struck me and hit home to me a lot was this sort of unwritten expectation that if you if you need accommodation in any way, in this case it happens to be accommodation so her wheelchair can move through space, but other people have other accommodation needs, that if you need accommodation that doesn't exist, that somehow you've got to be the one that turns into the like crusader and advocate person to get those things.
Yeah.
Especially I think with young people, it's like, well, this is how you can make a difference in the world. And I appreciated the fact that, Effie wrestles with that. Like, does she have to be the one that is responsible for making the change, or is it okay for her to go to a place where that, those support systems already exist, and her trying to decide what role she wants to play? And I'm just curious what how much of that was a conscious decision and how much of that just came from the character as you were creating her.
Yeah, I think for me as an author and me as a person who is disabled, I don't think that there's like a right or a wrong answer in this type of scenario. I think it depends on each person, each circumstance, and what they are individually willing to do in that moment. I have days where I'm really willing to educate and advocate, and
Yeah.
moments where I'm like, Google exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it comes and it goes. It goes in how people ask the question, where they ask the question, in a talk setting when we're well acquainted with each other, sure. In the line at Target, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
it's up to each person to put those boundaries up.
Yeah.
And um I think it's important for Effie to understand, because she has this dream school that she wants to go to and this dream life that she wants to have. And for her to say, I think it becomes a question of academically, she did her part, socially, she did her part. And the question remains like, how much of it, this dream, is up to her and how much of it is up to other people. And I I will say that I'm happy with the decision that she made. But I think if somebody else who reads the book who's disabled says I would have chosen differently, I think that that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I appreciated the most was that you let her make the decision, if that makes sense, that there was an acknowledgement that both of these are good and both of these are fine, and you can pick what is you need right in that moment. And that I really appreciated that, because I think that sometimes kids literature in particular, but I think in books in general, sometimes there's sort of the um, the making the reader responsible for changing the world all the time, you know what I mean? And I think there needs to be room to say, no, I can't, this is not something that I can do right now, or yes, this is something I can do right now, and not just sort of imply that one always has to step up and be the one fighting, for change. Sometimes you can be that person and sometimes you're not. And I think that Effie inhabits both of those roles in the book, which I really loved, that she had moments of advocacy and fighting, but then she had moments where she's like, no, people need to step up and help me too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, I just, I think I was trying to think of um how to phrase this, but one of the other things I appreciated about the book was her whole experience. Like, I think if you deal with a disability, whether it's a physical disability or like a brain difference, it's like your whole world does revolve around that because you've got to deal with that every day.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that I really loved about this book is that she's also a high schooler, and she's just a
Yeah.
high schooler, and she's normal, she's experiencing all the things that every other high schooler experiences. And I thought that was another thing that I appreciated, was that just it reminds people that um, we all have these same experiences. And I just wondered what pieces for you were important about that.
About the everyday life that she goes.
Yeah, just like reflecting more everyday life, and not all just everything that, not all about advocacy, or not all about trying to make changes.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people when I get up in the morning, I don't say to myself, I'm beginning my day as a person in a wheelchair. I say I'm beginning my day. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have to do all the same tests and have all the same concerns about the weather and my work day and how am I gonna get everything done and blah blah blah. And I think for Effie, I wanted to explore dating in a wheelchair and the fears
yeah,
that she would have around that and what that would be like for her. I wanted to explore how this really impacts friendships, particularly when your friends aren't disabled, and what strain and dynamic that can put on a relationship. Um, Familial relationships are really key to the book.
yeah,
What is that like for her family? What role does family play in her life? And also just I wanted her to have fun.
yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah,
scenes where she's with her friends and they are normal teenagers, because disabled
yeah,
teenagers are normal teenagers.
yeah,
They're
exactly.
normal people. And I tell people, when I was in high school, I didn't want to be doing advocacy work. I didn't see myself as an advocate. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be invited to parties. Like I wanted all of that any normal teenager wants.
Right. And I think what this book accomplishes so well is exactly that. And, just capturing that whole experience, and not making it about um, everything is bad all the time. It's just that, if that's the reality that you're facing, then you have the good and the bad, just like everybody else has the good and the bad. And I
Mhm.
guess I feel like that's why own voices are so important, because I think sometimes people writing from outside of an experience focus too much on the experience itself, instead of just portraying the whole fabric of someone's life. And so I just really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think too that when you don't write from the perspective, in my experience reading those types of books, they tend to focus a lot on disabled pain, and they
Yeah.
rarely focus on disabled joy. And there's a lot of
Yes.
disabled joy
Yeah.
to be had in the world, and a
Yeah.
lot of wonderful things that come from this experience as well. That I think unless you live it, you don't understand that.
Yeah. And I think that's true of all kinds of experiences, whether it's any kind of group that somebody from outside a group tries to write. They tend to focus on, oh, look at all the struggles that these people face. And it's like, well, that's true, but life isn't just that.
Right.
And
Nobody's
and
life is
and
all sad or all happy all the time.
yes, exactly, exactly. No, and I really love that. And I'm just gonna like interject, like, I'm sure anybody watching can tell I really like the book, but this book is just, I really, really loved it. And I loved the fact that it doesn't shy away from being very real about everything that Effie faces, because she is in a wheelchair, and because, people are completely clueless about what actually might constitute a difficulty for her, like the couple kissing in the middle of the ramp. I mean, it's those kind of little details, but then the more frustrating ones of, the school system, saying how great they are at accommodating her, and then they're just not. But I also loved that it's a book about friendships, and there's romance in the book, and there's going off to college angst in the book, and it's just you will if you like contemporary fiction from YA, and you like a little romance and a little friends and all of that, and you will love this. So please buy it. And also Claire was really kind enough to send us book plates. So if you come to the store and buy the book, I have a book plate that she has signed. And I'm actually going to jump over to non-book related questions, because I went on to your website today.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, research. And one of the things that I was like, okay, I need to know this story, is that you said you got to go on the tour of the House of Lords in England, and I want to know more about this.
I did. Yeah. So I am an alumna of Grinnell College in Iowa, and Grinnell took really good care of me accessibility wise. So much so that I was the first student at Grinnell to study abroad in a wheelchair. And Grinnell, I assume they still do. I don't know, but they had their own sort of study abroad program in London called Grinnell in London. And as part of that, the students did various internships in London, and I worked for a charity organization doing communications, and one of the I guess patrons of the organization had ties to a lord, like a friend of the organization, and there were like other interns there that I didn't go to college with. They were other American college students, and then maybe we're like 4 of us, and we just went over there, and he took us to lunch and like gave us a tour. It was amazing.
Oh, that is so cool. That's really fun. Is there any chance, of course, I know every author gets asked this, and it's one of the pet peeve author questions, but given that Effie is off to college and there seems to be a little bit of a window for it, do you imagine more stories with her in them, or is this pretty much probably just Effie's story and then you're going to move on to other stories?
So I totally, when I was in the book, I planned it solely to be a standalone. I never anticipated that anybody would even be like remotely interested in a sequel. And I've gotten maybe the 12th person to ask me this.
Yeah.
I just like, I'm floored by it. Because I never thought that anyone would care enough to read more. And so right now I will say that it's not planned, but never say never.
Yeah.
I love these characters, and I would love to check up on them again.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there has to be a story that you want to tell too, and not just. But I promise I don't normally ask people that, because I have enough author friends who are like, I hate when people ask me that. But it just was interesting with this particular group of characters. I was like, I could see there being more about them.
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know at this time.
Do you have other books that you are working on now?
I'm working on my second book now.
Yay. And I'm assuming it's at a point where you can't talk about it yet.
Mostly I can.
That's fair. That's okay.
It's another contemporary young adult novel about a teenager in a wheelchair, and it deals a lot with our friendship, and specifically what happens and maybe you grow apart and lose a friend at a young age. So it's very, I say that my taste in stories a lot is big feelings. And this is very much a big feelings book.
Yeah. No, it sounds, I will be waiting. I will be watching out for it. Because I think like I said earlier, I really think there just needs to be so much more, because I think as somebody who has not had the experience of being in a wheelchair, I can be sympathetic, but it helps me to have a story and have a character that is having these experiences. And I think at that point you go, oh, I never thought of that. And then you're out in the world and you're much more cognizant of, oh, that wouldn't work. And, that area wouldn't work. And this set of stairs wouldn't, or this ramp is terrible or whatever. Like, I think that sometimes we even need to see through somebody else's eyes, and the books do that for us, I think. So in addition to it being so important that people who have those experiences seeing themselves in books, which I think is the first priority of any book, to someone see themselves in the book. But I appreciated it because I one of my daughters has a disability, and it's been interesting to watch her navigate through the world. And hers isn't a mobility issue, and so she doesn't have as many issues, but she will suddenly encounter something that she can't do, and I'll be like, oh, I didn't even think about how that would be not work for you.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's an interesting, books are such a great way just to be able to expand your own understanding of how people experience the world. So anyway, just I'm more fangirling, I guess. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think about how it's so funny that I thought for years that stories about disabled characters and disabled heroines couldn't exist, because for years I related deeply to books that were about people that looked and behaved nothing like me, and
Yeah.
books, well known that books elicit empathy from readers. And yeah, I think everyone deserves to see themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So the other thing that you said on your website is that you like animals. I think it was dogs in particular. So I was going to ask you if you've met any interesting dogs lately.
Lately, yes, I mean, I'm always getting dogs. I live in Minneapolis, and Minneapolis has a skyway. Parts of Minneapolis are connected to
Yes.
the skyway.
Yeah.
And I saw some guy walking a chihuahua in the skyway today, and I did not know that was a thing that
That's very cool. Yeah, we went to a coworker and I went to Children's Institute in Milwaukee, and that was my first experience with the skyways, because we don't really need those out here so much.
Yeah.
So now is it Wild Rumpus that's in Minneapolis? Is
Yes.
right?
Yes.
With all the pets. We met them at Children's Institute.
Weeks ago.
So, and when you posted recently that you went to there and had an event there, I was like, oh, I want to go. So it's on my list of things to do in Minneapolis if I ever get out there.
It's a treasure.
Yeah, it sounds very, very, very neat. So you've got books that you're working on and maybe a sequel someday. Do you have any books that you've read recently that you just really love and would recommend to people?
Oh, yes. For a fellow 2023 debut, I read Eleanor Clover's 7% of Road Devereaux. It's about a high schooler who makes an app that predicts your future, like based on MASH.
Oh, yeah.
That we grew up playing, and it matches her with her ex-best friend that she hasn't spoken to in years. So
yeah, I think I saw the arc of that one go by. Yeah.
What else have I read recently? I'm probably currently I'm listening to Last Night at the Telegraph Club, and I'm probably the last person on earth to read.
No, I haven't done that one yet either. So
Yeah. And then I just finished Nina LaCour's adult novel, Yerba Buena, and I think that's like the perfect summer read because it's all about like I called it a feast for the senses. It was just like so much about food and the natural world, and it was just like a gorgeous read.
wow, neat. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being here tonight. It was really fun to talk to you.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
don't forget, you can get the book at the store along with a book plate that Claire has signed. So stop by and pick that up or call. And thank you again, Claire, so much for being with us. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.